Chartered Board Director in New Zealand and a member of the AICD here in Australia. This topic is very close to my heart. I'm actually going to be jumping in to support the team with this panel because we had a panelist drop out, but it'll be interesting to give my view from a board standpoint. So for our closing keynote panel, Abhijit Mukherjee will be moderating, communicating cloud security concerns to the board and people like me, and agreeing on cloud security priorities. Welcome.
So I think what's now increasingly becoming important with the changing landscape of cloud security is that what I feel, going back to the board with risk as a kind of the label on the report doesn't really look very maturing way of attending a board meeting. So I feel like it's more important to show it as an opportunity rather than as a risk all the time. Risks are obviously the opportunities in one perspective. I think going with that positive perspective is obviously something very constructive. And that is what I feel the year 2025 and onward will see, where the CISOs are becoming those kind of, the positive, flag bearer, and going with the board and, giving them the right kind of opportunity report. So coming back onto where I see the challenges evolving within the cloud security landscape is quantum computing and AI. So, Gavin, thanks for joining us on this. First, I would like to take this to you. What you can see from your perspective, what is evolving in the landscape, and how you can actually connect back into the boardroom on that side.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I'll take it macro level. The top 5 trends, or like the key trends that boards are facing into for 2025 are cybersecurity, no surprise; AI, no surprise; macroeconomic geopolitical challenges; climate change is an ongoing challenge. To put it in perspective with climate change, talking to the board member of New Zealand cricket, you kind of go like, oh, climate change in cricket? You're not going to magically love your cricket. But the thought and the consideration of, hey, can we actually play cricket in the future because of the heat? We're going to have players all over. How do we adapt with that in that long-term view? And so winding that back, that these are topical areas that are on top of mind of directors. So the key thing to take away is it's good that you're thinking about the opportunity rather than bring through the risks, but directors' key responsibilities are fiscal, operations, hiring, and ensuring that they have a good CEO leading the organization, setting the strategy. It's the board that set the strategy. I don't think a lot of people realize that. The board set the strategy and the CEO delivers it, and we all, as executives, hang our strategies off that and align it to that. A number of other things also, but managing risk and compliance is key. So no matter what, at the end of the day, cyber teams and security teams have a critical responsibility, and having been responsible for security in the past, it is elevating the discussion to the level of the board. Cybersecurity professionals and security professionals and executives need to speak the language of the board, and that is more important than ever. So being able to have those discussions, finding, and I talked about this in a previous session, I introduced the value in risk, the value in compliance and regulation. Being able to show by us having robust security mechanisms in place, controls in place, this allows us to go quicker. I use an analogy of brakes actually allow a car to go faster. if you think of it. The same applies for data governance, something that people's eyes glaze over too. But breaks allow tasks to go quicker. Security, good security governance, good data governance, all allow an organization to go quicker.
Absolutely.
And that's the ability to translate how you're doing that and how that investment is then going to allow the organization to activate on their digital transformations or enhance customer experience, make processes more seamless is key, and being succinct. It's going to be critical. If your board papers on security are more than 3 pages, you're going to lose them. Their packs are that big. So, yeah.
No, I quite love your analogy because I think what is that distinguishes a McLaren with a Toyota is its braking capability. So that's where I think is their disruptor, I would say. So rolling it back on Brett, on your side, because you're on the fintech financial side of this, what are the challenges you're seeing to express the cyber risk as an opportunity to both looking at the evolving threats in the cloud side?
I have a fantastic opportunity here to go second, but it's really frustrating going behind Gladwin because he's already described all of my challenges. As a very technical person, I'm very security oriented, I love my single pane of glass, I love looking at metrics, but my metrics are different to the board's metrics. My language is different to the board's language. I have a lot of respect for the board. They are delivering strategy or deciding on a strategy that is to be executed, and my role is to help them deliver that. That is my job. That is all of our job as technical people, is to help deliver that vision. But I don't speak that language. That's not a language that I got in engineering school, at least. And how can I more effectively work with my leadership team? I don't work with the board directly. I have an engineering manager, I have a CTO, and then there's the board. So what you said about the board packs, about having more than three pages, I don't get that much. I get a few line items. And I think this is what you were saying about, it's not about crying risk, but we need to convey a lot of meaningful information in a very short space to someone who's not technically on the same page as us to begin with. They don't see the world through the same lens. So how can we help them, and in terms of see the risk that we see in a meaningful way that's not just terrifying with statistics that the average data breach costs $3.44 million or whatever the half a dozen stats that I saw this morning were. They've seen that. That's not news to them. That shock effect is worn off. So how can I convey the objective of what we're going to do? Here is my roadmap, here is our prioritized list, and this is what I think we are going to be able to deliver in a reasonable time frame. So I think that's my biggest challenge, is to be able to work with the engineering teams to understand the outcomes and work with senior leadership and the board to understand their objectives and make sure that those two are aligned.
Yeah, I think that's quite a valuable thing. I think is to keep it short and simple. That is, I think, is the mantra to take it to the board. I quite like that because that's where your 2-liner or 3-liner will sit within the board's strategy around where to actually steer the organization on the thriving part and the journey.
So, and adding to that quickly also is the fact that you have to realize that similarly, I did my engineering degree, and it's not something that you go, hey, I want to be a board of directors one day. That's just come about, you know, with the opportunities I've faced into. But the majority of board directors are, guess what, accountants and lawyers, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons that I signed up to become a board of directors, because I wanted to change that. Due to the frustration of bashing my head against the wall going, there needs to be more technical expertise, and I need to be at the board table. But again, you can't beat them, you have to join them. Because it's learning their language, what's important, being able to show the value in risk. And I think the fact that you're up here presenting shows that you're generally different to most technical data and security people who, I think the number one scariest thought that any human has, ahead of dying is public speaking.
Yeah.
Right? So you're already ahead of the curve in your team. So it's look for the opportunities, put your hand up next time, because might be the CTO really doesn't want to present to the board.
Yeah.
So opportunities to step up if that's what you're into, and say, hey, I'd love to pull together the board papers, get involved with the process, get involved with educating the board. The EU has just mandated a new law that AI literacy is compulsory for board directors. That's how seriously they're taking it. And likewise, I'd say AI, and I've said it this morning, AI data security. We have to work, I'm a data person, the Chief Data and Analytics Officer by trade. We have to work closely together and present together with our initiatives. So it's having a cohesive approach across the organization and then presenting, speaking the language. And so that you get more than 3 lines, because that's horrific. 3 lines, directors don't know, and it's not that the directors don't care, it's they honestly don't know, because other people end up taking up 40 pages, and guess what, you get relegated to 3 lines.
Absolutely. I think that's what is the key, that you speak about your technicalities in the language of the board. So that is where our kind of craft relies, that we continue to prosper in our business of cybersecurity and providing resilience to the organization so that they can move and thrive at a speed that they want without getting hurt. So coming back onto the evolving opportunities around the technical risks which are there in the yesteryears, like misconfigurations or ransomware attack, what do you think about these kind of risks still persisting in the modern world, and how quantum computing and AI is going to influence these kind of threats further, spearhead them, and on the other side, on the defense side, how we can better prepare ourselves and we can take this story to the board in a very constructive manner?
Sure. There was a presentation here earlier in the day, and the way it framed that we still have the same root causes when we have incidents, and that's really sad. We have the tools, we have the systems in place, we've done our training, everything should be in place, and yet we still have phishing, we still have account takeovers, even though we have phishing testing, we have account monitoring, we have all of these other tools in place, and it still happens. So I find that I'm internally struggling a lot when it comes to what's the threat of quantum computing. Like, look, we don't need quantum computing to break encryption. We already can't do encryption. As a reflection of society and a whole, and looking at some of the major breaches that come about and the level of human error involved in them. So I'm mathematically and scientifically very interested in quantum computing, and I'm keen to see where it will go. Moving to a quantum safe encryption cipher at the moment, I don't know how that's going to rank in terms of priority, that especially conveying that to the board. I'm not sure how that's going to be seen with them when their purview is the day-to-day business operations. I think we should have an eye to 12 months or 2 years down and be working towards a very ill-defined but directed roadmap. And we should be doing POCs and making sure that we're able to capture those opportunities as they come up. But I think in terms of presenting it to the board, I'd like to get your take on that in terms of how valuable is that right now versus being prepared for it.
So I think the keyword is strategic, to stay strategic on these particular risks and see how we can adapt and be resilient before time. So rolling it over to you, Vipin, what's your take on that?
So, because I'm more technical than most board directors, I'm extremely frustrated with hype cycles. There was a senior director I saw recently present, and he said, look, this is the year of quantum computing, and I sat there and I was like, oh, is it really? In my view, commercial sort of implementations of quantum computing are at least 5 years away, and that's an organization can even afford it. Let's be realistic. So I think we, technical people and the chief data officers, the chief CISOs, and our technical people within the business have a way to go in building those trusted relationships with the directors and educating them. Again, they're accountants and lawyers, so that they don't buy into the hype. And exactly like you said, go, this is what our plan is to be quantum ready, and we're planning accordingly, but we need to get the foundations in place. I'm still, again, frustrated, just like you, that it's often the basics that people get wrong. And again, having an IT auditor background, it's always, look, use preventative controls rather than detective. Automate your controls. You know, third-party vendors, for example, the very minimum, set up access for them for the period of time that they're going to deliver the work. Okay, you need to come in, you need access for a week to deliver this, you are given a week.
Absolutely.
And if you need an extension, we'll give it to you on a case-by-case basis. You have to come to us, but it automatically deactivates your account after a period of time. But that continues to be an ongoing challenge. There've been presentations on third-party vendors, and some of the biggest breaches are through third-party vendors. And I think back to when I had a machine learning company come and do some work for us. I literally looked at the document end to end, grilled them, and said, you have access between this time and this time. And I want to know exactly what data is going in, how it's anonymized, and getting across that, and then being able to report that to the board on ROI. That's another interesting thing that I don't see. A lot of technology implementations that have business cases go through that never actually then report back on the ROI. And look, I've worked in the industry where certain vendors inflate their ROI numbers in the business case, and that's very frustrating. And it's better to undercook the numbers and over-deliver than ever over-promise and under-deliver. There's one day, and board members like me coming on board now, and technical people like yourself who have potentially aspirations for board directorships, those are the questions you're going to be asking, and people are going to end up with egg on their face.
Yeah, I think which is one thing that has been reflected upon this particular point is those non-human identities and vendor identities. So probably I think as part of identity access governance, life cycle is not adhered to, and that's where persistency of these identities have actually caused breach, because it's created kind of a vector for the perpetrator. So looking at advanced persistent threat, which are like now mostly the nation state actors, we can see, and with the heated geopolitics between the panda and the Uncle Sam there. So what do you think the world will be in 2025 and beyond, and how do you think the board need to be actually apprised upon?
So the board is aware of the geopolitical climate and challenges. However, I feel that they're aware of it from a trade standpoint. You know, we saw Trump fire a shot across the bows with Mexico the other day, me being a Kiwi. As soon as those tariffs were put in place, or threatened to be put in place, Fisher and Paykel healthcare shares dropped a significant amount because a lot of the manufacturing is out of Mexico. So I feel that boards are focused on the financial aspect. They aren't, again, and that's the education standpoint, is the perspective of security people need to be educating them on, hey, look, it's not just potential tariffs, it is also security. And these threat vectors coming from various countries that are also a risk. And again, it's that education. AI literacy has been mandated in the EU. I feel that you need to have data, digital, cyber, and AI mandated to a certain level enough that people are comfortable just knowing enough of the risk or knowing enough to go, I'm not quite sure about this, because one of the things that board directors have the right to do at any point is to pull in an expert. They are allowed to pull in an expert to review an area that they don't have comfort in. And we, technical people, need to give them enough knowledge to know, I don't know enough, I want to get independent assurance or comfort from an external party.
Yeah, because I think the tariffs will also see your third-party, reliance in getting impacted. All of a sudden, overnight, your services
Costs only shoot up 25-50%, significant potential.
Absolutely. So, what's your take around their building resilience? So, do you agree with the point where you should look for alternative service providers, diversify your portfolio? How you would like to do it?
It's an interesting one. As a technical specialist, I have a perhaps backward view on certain things like multi-cloud, because that increases the complexity of my workload or my team's workload. And the concept of asking why, I'm slightly better than my 5-year-old, but I want to ask, what's the objective? It's an advanced version of why. What's the objective? So if we are trying to mitigate, and the answer is always we are trying to mitigate a risk, and the risk might be increased costs. Okay, that's fine. What's the investment and what's the ROI? And that's something that's very nebulous and very hard to quantify, especially at our level, because we're not necessarily aware of the board's machinations and what the objectives are beyond what they've shown us. So in terms of managing that, honestly, I need to look to my executive leadership team and ask, what problem are we trying to solve? And then I'm going to make recommendations to them from a technical perspective, because we have financial experts, we have legal experts, and I need to trust them to do their job, and I can help with the bit that I'm a specialist in. So to avoid answering your question, I'm going to work with the other specialists in the organization and hopefully come to a good recommendation for our business case right now. And that's going to change over time as the information changes, or it should.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point around to take away from here is to be very rational and pragmatic around which specific vendor and what is your objective, which geography you are actually focusing, and then aligning on those sides so that you can stay under the radar or line of fire from there.
So I think what prompt and a tip for yourselves is every security person or every person involved in minimizing risk should have access and use a freely available generally within an organization, should have seen the risk matrix for your organization and be able to go, okay, I understand exactly how this risk sits on the overall risk matrix, because guess what, that's what the board looks at. And if you think there's misalignment or there isn't a mitigating control, i.e. we'll go multi-cloud and that reduces the risk within risk appetite, then you should be calling that out using the language of, I feel that we're being a bit optimistic and actually the risk is significantly higher based on the risk and impact. So I would recommend people go out and go, hey, look, can I get a look at the risk matrix and have a look at that. Sit down with your risk and compliance team or someone who's been involved with pulling that together and get a view across that, or your CTO.
Fantastic. I think another thing that has been seen is that two disparate kind of risk stories coming up. One pertains to cyber risk, another to the enterprise risk. So, what do you think on the board table? Is there a kind of a trend which is saying that the cyber or the GRC needs to cooperate or collaborate with enterprise risk and go as a single kind of face to the board from the perspective of risk, or you think the reporting should be autonomous in parallel, whereas the cyber risk must find space with the group risk statement to the board? What's your take on that?
That's a fascinating one, because I've been involved in the risk matrix, like scaling basically, normalizing risk. And I find that's a really challenging one for me, because I have a very technical take on the risk and I understand my risk relatively well, and we can try to put metrics against it. But okay, we have a data breach, we have malware. What does that mean? Okay, that's between a 2 and a 5. It's probably at the high end, but it could be down towards the lower end. How do we normalize that with the context of risk in the wider business? There are legal risks, there are sales risks, and all of these other risks within the business. How can we convey that information in a meaningful way that can work well with the business objectives? And I think that's one. It's a challenge that can be continued to be improved upon over time. And I think that's something that I'm really focusing on right now, to work with the compliance manager and the risk committee, because they're the ones who then present that risk to the board. And that's something that I'm becoming more involved in, and I hope to have a better answer this time next year.
Yeah.
Well, and that's great, right? And that's another finding. If you're finding that the approach to quantify the risk and the impact is great, that's a finding in itself. It should actually be as cut and dried as possible, because if you leave it up to interpretation, that's risk in itself.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a view. I did a piece of work for a major utilities company in New Zealand, right? With massive dams generating electricity for New Zealand. And I remember reporting to the chief risk officer one time, and again, likewise, I've taken the view of, hey, look, this is a significant, well, what's the word? A significant risk to the organization. And thankfully, this chief risk officer was a good sort, and sat me down and goes, Glavin, I'll put it into perspective for you. A significant risk, when we open up the risk matrix, a significant risk to this organization is a dam bursting and thousands of people dying. And I went, yeah, it's not significant then.
Yeah.
It's a high. And he goes, yeah, there you go. So it is understanding the metrics that make up the risk matrix. And if it's unclear, again, as we as technical people, 1 and 0, it should be straightforward, is communicating that and then making sure that's clear. And that will help significantly in making sure everyone aligns and speaking the language of the business. And there are different metrics that are generally used on risk matrices, from health and safety, dam bursting, financial, reputational. They should be pretty cut and dry. So you can go, well, if we had a potential cyber breach, it would be in the news media for over a week, probably a month. Oh, very cut and dry. There you go. It should be, and if it isn't, that's an opportunity to improve.
I think that's a kind of a great story around why it is important to convey the risk appetite, and there should be clarity around understanding the risk appetite on both sides of the line. I think that's a very good example from there. So now on the final side, as we are almost for 3 minutes short of break from there. So we are almost what's that?
About 6 minutes.
Yeah. So I think so 6 minutes to go. So we can possibly take another kind of a topic to sneak in. Looking at again coming back onto the geopolitics, and we can see what is actually recently happened with DeepSeek arriving in the landscape, and then OpenAI getting challenged, and then the Western consortium launching attack on the Chinese consortium, and what we see, the net result is 1.1 million privacy records available and visible on the internet as a result of that. Now, coming back onto what is very pertinent with cloud landscape is denial of services. Now, how do you see that as a kind of opportunity or a risk, and how would you like to actually answer a question that may come up? Because DOS, as per the statistics, is a very clear, abbreviation which is across the board, and a lot of people understand that. If they do not understand what is the risk within the organization, they at least know what is DOS and DDoS. So how do you think you can take it best as an opportunity or as a risk to the board?
So the approach I always took was trying to be practical and pragmatic. You could spend millions of dollars to try and make your environment resilient 99%. What's the value back or the return on that? It comes down to what's the acceptable amount that we're willing to spend to be sufficiently resilient, and the trade-off, cost benefit. Yes, you could try and go to the nth degree, but for most organizations, that's not going to be possible. And in reality, even in my previous roles, the statement I used to make was, if they want to get in, they're probably going to get in. But what we need to do is, and I used to use this analogy, how do you outrun a lion? Does anyone know how you outrun a lion?
Be faster than the guy next to you.
Yeah, be faster than the guy next to you. So as long as you make it sufficiently hard compared to the next organization, these people always go for the easiest. You didn't have your password sorted out, you didn't have MFA, they'll go after them. You just have to make it sufficiently hard enough, and you have to make your organization resilient enough with an appetite with the board and so on, and have that caveat with the board, right, where you go, look, we've reached this point, it'll cover the majority of situations, but being completely clear, look, if they really want to, and they fully DDoS us, we'll be going down, all our other counterparts will also be going down. But we potentially will be better than 80% of our counterparts.
Yeah. I think something that we can also do is with cyber threat intel, which is now picking up, and it's a very good, valuable tool to transparently demonstrate to the board that we are on the line of fire, and that's where the opportunity for us to actually improvise on that in the relative terms, what our peers are doing within the industry, and where we stand from that side. So another is a point like, and the last one I would say, how do you think we should be now evolving to project ourselves as a cost center to the board or as a profit center? So cyber as a cost or cyber as a profit?
That is a continuously moving locus depending on what the objectives are, in my opinion. So if we start off as a startup or neither, it's just part of the business. And then it's really hard to get money for objectives or for projects because it's seen as a cost, but not as a profit. Okay, so as at the next stage of maturity, we can create security as a cost center. The risk there is you creating a silo because the other parts of the business no longer want to help out because you're your own entity, and there's a certain pathological risk there that you could make things worse and more siloed. The end game would be a distributed, everyone is in security approach, and that's great, but then that's very hard to enumerate the value of, either cost or profit when the entire security team is distributed across the whole company. So I find that one really interesting, and I'm yet to try to understand how to create that beyond a point in time, because I don't have a good recommendation overall other than what is the problem we're trying to solve right now and how can we work together to do that. And at the end of the day, the board is operated by finances and lawyers, so we need to work within that, making them help support the business. But there's probably a small change that we can make to support that.
My view from seeing it firsthand, being involved in projects where I unfortunately come in to try and break down the walls between security and data teams, I'd say the big one is that I'd recommend to all of you here is try for we thinking. Engage early with the various teams. Be a team. I know technical people like ourselves are very much insular, going, okay, look, this is what I do in my team. It's finding the people within the security team who can be partners and partner up with the business and engage early, security by design with digital transformations, so that you can almost weave in at the end of the transformation or the platform being delivered, hey look, the security team, the data teams were engaged with early on, they were trusted advisors, and instead of being blockers, allowed us to reach objectives safely at the end of the day. Look, I've been pulled into a number of projects, at the end of the project being delivered, going, hey, we need reporting done. And my data team's going, hold on, we don't even know what the data structures are. You should have involved us in the beginning. And everyone gets set up for failure. Then they got, the data teams are being developed. Security, you probably get involved, and I have been involved at the tail end, going, guys, you didn't think of X, Y, Z. Try and get ingrained in the business. You could still be a centralized team, still be a cost center, but ingrain yourself into those key touch points when projects and initiatives are being delivered, where you're going, yes, but you need to have X, Y, and Z in place, and let's do it together. That would be my parting comment, is going, fine, cost center, you can be a team of security individuals, but ingrain yourself into the business and be a trusted advisor as much as possible in delivering their initiatives for business objectives and delivering to the board strategy.
I think that's a fantastic insight. I think the time is ready. We finish off for today. I think a couple of things that we would like as a takeaway is that while we are reporting to the board, I think we need to keep in mind that we focus on greater transparency and explaining what our liners are in the report. I think that means you need to back it up not just with statistics. You need to back it up with proper cyber threat intel. Then enhanced real-time reporting rather than generating. I think that's gone. What do you require now to provide a real-time reporting? What is also important now that the cyber risk or the GRC needs to be with enterprise risk. Then emphasis on the third-party risk and the fourth-party risk also, if you are in the government sector, which is very important. And then this one is increased regulatory compliance. I think that's very important that we need to keep in mind. Europe is the disruptor, I would say, and the world is a lot of evolving nations are really adapting it to framing very proactive regulations, which is, I think, it's a very key challenge or important challenge for business and cyber. What is also important is around providing the right kind of analytics insight, and then focus on cyber resilience, clear communication with risk appetite, and the last one is standard reporting metrics. I think that's I think from this. Thanks a lot for the time.